Please welcome to the stage Ollie Barrett, MBE.
Hello, good afternoon, and a very, very warm welcome to Responsible Business Live 2022. Welcome. And wherever you've come from, whichever organisation, whichever part of the world, whether you're with us in this magnificent hall, whether you're joining us on the live stream, you're welcome today. I'm Ollie Barrett, and it's my honour to be your Master of Ceremonies for the next hour or so for what is an incredibly special event. You may have detected this, you may have sensed it, you may just have realised from the slightly heightened security procedures. Our good news for you this afternoon, everybody, is that His Majesty the King is with us in the building today. Hugely special occasion. His Majesty is meeting with two groups of colleagues as I speak to you now, and with luck and timings going to time, he'll join us briefly in this main hall to share in what is an incredible year for business in the community. And you have all played an incredible role in that. It's an anniversary year. I was honoured to be a guest at the alumni gathering. It was like friends reunited. It really was. And many of you here I see again today. Thank you for your journeying spirit all along those 40 years. It's been an extraordinary year. Let's have a look at this.
It is extraordinary to think that business in the community is now 40 years old. Looking back, I cannot begin to thank you enough for all your support and commitment over that time.
Well, there really couldn't be a better way than that to bring this phenomenal network to life. If you are not already a member of Business in the Community, please see today perhaps as the threshold. We would love to talk to you. Our advisors are with us outside the hall today and at the membership hub for more conversations later today. Let's find out more about the organisation, where it's been recently and where it might go next. Please welcome up the Chair of Business in the Community, Gavin Patterson. Cheers, Gavin. Be honoured.
Thank you. This marks our 40th anniversary, made even more special today by His Majesty the King joining us. After 40 years of leadership, we could not be more proud of his continued support. I am honoured to be the Chair of Business in the Community and have this opportunity to work with you, all of you, around the UK. After 40 years, this is a good chance for us to reflect on what makes this organisation so special that it continues to engage and challenge. I think it is because our members want to take action when it's needed most, always being practical and impactful. Let me start with a big thank you to all of those who support us, starting with our leadership teams, and to all of those heading our campaigns, as you saw earlier. There have been some really great achievements. Almost 1,000 companies have now signed the Race Charter, representing 6.2 million employees now working in a more inclusive workplace. 500,000 roles have been made more accessible because of our Opening Doors campaign. And we have seen more than £140 million delivered into target places through support for major regeneration initiatives, including town deals, community renewal, and city of culture. I want to thank all of our members, and a special thank you to the founding members, still with us 40 years on, with so many of you leading campaigns and driving our work. I would also like to extend an extra heartfelt thanks to those founder companies who stepped forward to support this anniversary year. So much has happened thanks to you. We are also delighted to welcome all the new members to BITC. And now BITC, as you saw in the film, now employ almost 20% of the working population in the UK. This morning, we started with the Seeing is Believing report back, an example of the King's support and vision. The power of Seeing is Believing is that it catalyses action, and you'll get a chance to hear all about the impact of the programme later today. I am one of 25,000 inducted into responsible business through Seeing is Believing. I can testify how powerful it is, because it is, in fact, why I'm standing here today as chair of BITC. And it gives me great pleasure and pride to be able to announce Salesforce's partnership with BITC, which will enable Seeing is Believing visits into places of the greatest need over the next 3 years. As part of that, BITC is calling on 250 business leaders to step up and come out with us on a visit into these communities to understand how together we can lessen the impact of the cost of living crisis and to create a more sustainable, equitable future in the long term. To help steer us, I'm grateful to the new Cost of Living Task Force that has been assembled to advise, work together and drive action through BITC. And last but not least, responding to the extreme need of our communities and our communities are facing, BITC has decided to relaunch the National Business Response Network, also known as the NBRN, with thanks to AXA and BP, who have generously supported us, and we're hoping more will step up. Launched in 2019, NBRN connected businesses to communities where the need was most, helping over 2 million people It was described by government as the best and most effective response to COVID-19 from the voluntary sector. We hope this simple and effective solution will help focus support where it is most required. We have to take action. This is why BITC exists, to support action, to make things fairer and greener, to make work for people and the planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin. Thank you very much indeed. We'll see you shortly. Purely out of interest, would you put your hand up, please, if you have attended a Seeing is Believing visit? I would love to see, look at these hands around the hall. Fantastic. Thank you for that show of support. As Gavin has mentioned, we are on the hunt for the next 250 leaders today to commit to those visits. It is now time to hear firsthand from two people who have been on those Seeing is Believing journeys, indeed led them. They need very little introduction. Zara Barololumi leads Salesforce, Chief Executive of Salesforce in the UK, Ireland, and what to say about Alan Leighton? Well, he chairs the Cooperative Group, Simba, Pizza Express, and Brewdog. It sounds like a jolly good party to me. Let's ask Zara and Alan up to the stage, please. Good to see you, Zara. Good to see you, Alan. Thank you for being here. Well, we've got some time for sort of slightly more formal sort of report backs, if you like. But before we do that, Zara, give us a sort of glimpse of where you went on the ground, and when was this? Just help paint us a picture.
Well, thank you, Ollie. We were part of I was part of the Coventry visit, so I was very, very honoured to be included in the Coventry visit, and that was in May this year. And 15 leaders, some fabulous leaders. Steve Hughes, CEO of Coventry Building Society, Kirsty Donnelly from City and Guilds, John Lewis Capita, great cadre of people, led by the wonderful John Allen.
Yes,
Chair of
Tesco.
That's it, yes. And we were kicked off the day with some conversations with local councillors, local leaders, to really kind of tune into what we were about to see and experience. And I think that process was really important to do that.
So you're sort of seeing alongside your peers, your colleagues.
That's right. We're primed and ready, and we're itching to get there. And then we went and we visited 3 fabulous facilities, 2 of which I'll talk about in detail later, so I won't spoil that. But one I do want to highlight is the Severn Trent Training Academy. And what's really beautiful about this is that not only does it provide skills and capabilities for their own employees, but actually provides skills to the local community members and provides pathways to employment.
And this is on the ground. Fantastic.
Absolutely brilliant.
So it would be good to unpick a bit of this as well. But Alan, this was not your first rodeo. Tell us about the longer journey, because you've been leading these and been on these over the years.
Yeah, I've probably done, I was thinking about 25 years of it. And started off at Leeds when we had Asda, and just finished up in Rochdale. What people, and lots of people have been involved in it. The other thing that you forget to say, they're great fun.
We're allowed to say it.
This is not we've got to go. They are great fun, and you meet some amazing people. We often think that you go to these places and they'll be down at the heel. They're not. I'd encourage anybody to do, go on and get good fun, and you can make a difference.
So what do you say to our honoured guest this morning that says, Alan, I do site visits all the time. I've visited a charity just last week. How is this a bit different?
Well, because I think you get, it's much more intimate. I mean, a visit is a visit. We all do visits. It's sort of a bit cosmetic.
On the SIBs, it's very intimate. You get down, you talk to the people. We're very good. The team here are very good at getting the people who are prepared to say how they feel. How they really feel. Yeah. And so I think that's the major difference. Yeah, it's very intimate.
Please.
I just want. They are enormously fun. The visits are enormously rewarding. And so, if you believe that you're the person that will just give and share and provide, that's the wrong mindset. Actually, I learned so much on that visit. I got just as much inspiration and insight that helped me as a leader. So
Yeah.
I think that's an extraordinary exchange.
There's that sense of camaraderie, of, dare I
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
fun, of bonding.
Yeah.
Discomfort, does that factor?
Yes, shock and
Yeah.
awe, I think. One thinks that they understand some of the issues that folks face until you actually understand in the context or the setting of a particular...
But it's positive shock.
It
You know, I mean, it's not shock,
Inspiring.
it's positive shock.
Yeah.
And because you see remarkably how people are dealing with all of this, because they just get on with it.
Yeah.
You know, that is such a big, that it's not, these are not people who want handouts. These are people who want to be part of something, do something, they're proud in their communities. Yeah. It's a very different thing.
And Alan, over those 20 plus visits, if you were to take us back, is there a moment that you would call back from your memory banks, a moment on the ground?
Yeah, I might do that when the King's here.
Oh, if
the King's here. We've got a little memory I'll share with him,
Good.
He'll be
Because
embarrassed
I
by
think
it, but doesn't matter.
what I'm interested in is, as chair of organisations, leaders, you're hugely well briefed when you're going into, for example, a board meeting. I just wonder, to what extent surprise still plays a role in terms of being confronted things. It must rest on asking good questions, on actually getting to know the thing that didn't appear in the annual report.
And you had the opportunity to ask those questions, and to your point, it is more intimate, you dig deep, and you hear different perspectives, and it just suddenly sets off a whole load of sparks and ideas in your head, and you take that back, and in my case, took it back and talked to my team and thought about how we can respond to this.
And purely out of interest here, you're going on your own, are you going with colleagues, and how do you even begin to share what is a very intense experience?
You went on your own?
Yeah, no, I mean, I just go back to this point, is that the most important thing to do is listen, not talk. And, there's two types of listening to respond, which most of us do, and listening to hear, which not a lot of us do. If you go and listen to hear on these visits, then you really learn something. And I think that is very important, that you are not the most important person on that visit. You're there to listen to the most important people, who are the people who you're visiting. That's the difference.
So there's that sense of humility. And what do you say, because there are people on the threshold, on the fence today, Zara, who are contemplating a visit. I suppose my question really is, what do you say to them, but also why? Why? What does it really boil down to? And Alan, I want to ask you that same question.
I would say jump in. Just jump in and learn about, zoom in on a community that's meaningful to you, or go and broaden your horizons and learn about a brand new community. I said it before, I got just as much back. I got more back than I expected. Actually, that was wonderful. I just think you can't be a successful business without understanding the context and the community and the landscape you operate within. These are real people. These are people. We are part of the fabric of the UK and Ireland. So
we notice that doubling down from Salesforce today. So thank you for that. And what do you say to that?
I think it's the same. What I always find, I love going on them actually, because it breaks my routine. So I'm totally out of my comfort zone. I'm sort of not in control. I don't know who I'm going to see. I don't know what I'm going to find out. And I find that really refreshing. It sort of sharpens you actually. And it reminds you don't know everything. And I think for business leaders, that's a really important thing to have. Moments where you realise you don't know everything.
But when are we going to get you on a visit, Ollie?
Anytime. Sign me up, Zara. Seriously.
We need to get you out.
I would love it. And please, others who want to join us today. Oh, by the way, who is tempted as you hear us exchanging today? Who can we come and talk? Yes, thank you, sir. Yes. Come on, I've sold auctions for less than that. Good, any scratch of the head, we will sign you up. I have to warn you at this point. I mean, here's a personal question. It can be very tempting for a leader to jump in with both feet, to say, we'll commit to this, this, and this. And yet you think, I'm running an organisation. We have to think, how do we tread that line and not lose the moment?
Well, if I may, in the context of volunteerism, I think we've moved beyond the paint a fence, plant a garden, lay a wall. Of course, those things exist, but actually, to your point, this is something that you can really engage with. And I would, I'm still learning. We're still learning. So we didn't turn up and say we're going to do this, 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 and this straight away. We committed to a partnership to drive a bit more meaningful, deeper interaction, so that we can actually learn organically. how to help.
I think we've learned over years actually that, in a strange way, I think in the early years, because it was all quite new, it was like a one-off. So everybody went and they said they'd do some things, and we did some, but it never really joined up again. I think now, and again, credit to the BITC team, they do a great job actually on the ground. That doesn't happen anymore. I think that is the major difference. And never, I think also, we got a responsibility in this. Don't make false promises. Don't commit to something you're not going to do, because frankly, most people, when you see them, actually don't believe you're going to do anything.
Yeah.
That's the difference. They actually don't believe.
Skepticism almost.
Exactly.
So do what you say you're going to do. Yeah, because there is that sort of spontaneity, that temptation, isn't there? Yeah. So your advice, and we'll hear more about what happened on the visit, but your advice to anyone who's already signed up but wants to get the most from a visit, Zara, what's your top tip? It's already perhaps in the calendar. What do you say to them?
Well, I was going to say get it in the calendar first. Maybe speak to some other folks that have been on the visits to maybe learn some lessons, and we were happy. I'm going to volunteer Alan to talk to you all. I'm going to give out his email. I think just learn from some of the visits that have been that have happened before, so that you can maybe have the right frame of mind.
Yeah, just get into that right mindset. Yeah, Alan, any other tips?
I think it's the same. I mean, it is. Don't think that it's not fun.
Yeah.
The most important thing, this is really good fun, and you learn a lot, and I think it develops you as a person. Yeah. And if you think about it that way round, as opposed to it's just a visit, then that's a completely different way of thinking about it.
Yeah, so it was really interesting. And I'll talk about it later, but I took some of my team back to the centres and the communities we talked about. I offered them all an out. I said, if you're treating this as a day out where we're doing, a volunteering activity, just a one-off, or you're too busy to give some commitment to this over a period of time, please don't join us. And actually, it was really interesting. Nobody dropped out. Everyone came in with an open mind. So I took my team back there knowing we would be in it for the long haul.
Yeah. It's really good advice. And I think around the hall as well, I'm just conscious when I see leaders like David Grayson, when I see Paul Dreschler, when I see Christine Hodgson, I think of the wealth of experience we've got across this network. So, Alan, again, it's sort of more of a meta question about the network itself. How do you get the most from this network?
Well, I think the other thing to do is involve your organisations in it. Yeah. I always try and take somebody who's in my organisation along as well, because I want them to learn. So it's important, obviously, that, well, it's not important. We lead them because it's a way in which we get people to go. Mm-hmm. But actually the most important thing is it's the people who don't normally lead who learn the most.
Yes.
And actually often add the most, because they're, sometimes we're very far removed from what we see. Yeah. And I think that's dangerous.
Yeah, but you're both there making me think about the makeup of the economy, After all, small and medium-sized businesses, make up 99% of businesses. We can't do it without the large companies, but to the scale up, the smaller organisation, you chair more than one, that says, oh, maybe that's something for the really massive organisations, maybe not one for us yet.
Interesting, I find that, the big organisations obviously do it, but the small organisations are often the best at doing this, because they happen to be in the community. Yeah. They're not national, they're local. Yeah. And so it's their community and it's their people, and they know them and they know the issues. So I don't think it's a big versus small. Often I think small actually engages more than big in this.
So to what extent is there almost a healthy competition amongst businesses to say, well, hang on, if you're doing that, we will do that? Or even collaboration, we can only do this if you do that.
I would say collaboration is the overriding sentiment and activity, actually, rather than competition. And it's everybody's focused on a common objective: do better, be better, help, support. And actually, it's fascinating if, in our case, if we can't perhaps provide something or support something, we've got a really brilliant, board of or a network of leaders that we can call upon. And, I saw that in action with Steve Hughes at Coventry Building Society, really tapping us all up to fulfil a funding need. So we collaborate, and that's the other benefit. Yes, it's absolutely fun. Yes, you learn, but actually you also build a lovely network of people that are really aligned on values.
Yeah. So just in practical terms, because I think we're thinking today about, just imagine if this network could collaborate more deeply, more profoundly all year round. What could that look like? Because I think that's part of why we're here today, to think about how to really ratchet that up. Any wider thoughts on that?
Just one of the conversations we had earlier in the readout, the feedback report, was it's really now upon us to capture and codify what's working.
Yes.
And take the best of everything we see around the country and really try to transfer that and scale that across the country for maximum impact, so that we really do optimise the effort that everybody's really putting in. I think that's our next frontier.
Because otherwise, Alan, that's the peril, isn't it? The inspiration gets wasted. You see this incredible thing, but somehow those dots don't get joined. So in practical terms, and if nothing else, you're a practical thinker who enjoys separating the wheat from the chaff on this. How do you do that in practice? How do you make sure that it isn't, oh, good to see our leader got thoroughly inspired?
Yeah.
What happened?
But I think also this evolves. We've been going 40 years, but we're still evolving. And the reason we're still evolving is there are the issues change. There are issues today that weren't there 5 years ago. So the issues change. And that's why I think it's really important for business. I make my only one political point, and I don't really make political points. I actually fundamentally believe that businesses can do more for communities than governments can. And that is a big responsibility for us, but we need to suck it up. Because often, we go on these and our frustration is we can't quite finish it off because, there's some quango or some big piece of administration that takes forever. I think one, we evolve, and two, we have to recognise as businesses we have a responsibility to the people who live in our communities, and we can influence that much more than I think government can.
Yeah, and so now, well, in fact, I might even, I'm going to continue and sort of probe you on this as we go through our next chapter. But I'm going to ask you to generalise, Zara, because I'm interested in the appetite, particularly of the people joining Salesforce today, to make a difference, to invest in their communities. I wonder to what extent that plays out in the conversations you have, or to what extent Alan might say it was ever thus.
Well, one of the things I'm really proud of about Salesforce is that we are a very values-driven organisation, and actually that attracts, in of itself, that attracts so much talent, because if you think about the next generation and actually our current generation, they do more than pay lip service to giving back, volunteerism, activism. We've got a very active and activist workforce. And just like Alan talked about, make sure your team learns with you. I did take my team back. You're stealing my thunder now. I was going to talk about this later. But I did take my team, and I was really thoughtful about the types of teams, or the profile of the teams that I would take back, because I wanted to make sure there was the right chemistry with the different organisations that we wanted to go back. It is a fundamental part of our employee value proposition. Being able to do something like this is a fundamental part.
And it really is attracting them in the first place.
It attracts people, it keeps people, it's the glue that binds us together. It is meaningful.
How does that strike you?
Volunteering actually is really increasing, again, because lots of people want to be supportive, and I think that's a really big thing for us, actually, because most of that volunteering is in the communities, again, which is where the issues are. So my whole thing is, we should encourage our people to be part of this. Actually, they're not having too much encouragement.
You're pushing it,
they want to be part of it. Because I go back to, they live in those communities. That's the critical thing.
Yeah.
They've got better ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
They've got better ideas. There's more brain power trying to solve some of these
harvesting
issues.
those ideas.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, look, it's so generous of you to share those. But speaking of pushing an open door, it gives me great pleasure to ask our whole audience here today to please rise to welcome His Majesty the King. Thank you. Thank you. Your Majesty, welcome.
welcome Your Majesty. On behalf of everyone in the room and the countless people, organisations, members and partners you have influenced over the last 40 years, we are honoured and delighted you're able to join us today. The fact we are gathered here is a tribute to you, Your Majesty, and your leadership. After 40 years, your leadership can still be felt and seen through programmes like Seeing is Believing. Over 25,000 business leaders have joined Seeing is Believing at some point or another. The programme has catalysed partnerships, launched campaigns, and changed lives, and many of us are here today because we were inducted into responsible business leadership through the programme, because of you. On behalf of all of us at BITC, we will ensure your programme continues to drive impact. And to that end, I have pledged Salesforce's support for the next 3 years to ensure the programme drives engagement into those places of greatest need, especially vital in this time of cost of living crisis. Earlier today, we held the time-honoured tradition, the Seeing is Believing report back. And I want to now ask Alan Layton, who led the visit to Rochdale, and Zara Baralumi, the visit to Coventry, to give us a taste of what was reported back. Alan.
Your Majesty, boss, now the big boss. 25 years ago, you got me doing this, and here I am 25 years later still doing it. It's been an amazing experience. And one of the things I think is really important, Seeing Believing is such a great name for what actually happens. Because if you don't see, you don't believe. And we were just talking about it before. That's fundamentally what happens here. You see things that you would not have seen and you would not believe. So it's a great name for what is a great piece of work. I did Leeds. I did Leeds about 3 times. We did Burnley. And I was thinking about Burnley only yesterday because if you remember, this was the first time, I think, that Her Majesty the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh had actually come on a trip with you. And I used to get a call for 3 days before from everybody saying, is it going to be all right? Is it going to be all right? Is it going to be all right? Because, you know, the Prince is going to have his homework marked. And so we had a great day, but I always remember the best thing about it was we came up the Weaver's Triangle on a canal boat. And there was you, Her Majesty the Queen and the Duke, and I was in the back, and it was cold. And the Duke came to me and he said to me, young man, he said, I'm glad I didn't go to war in one of these, because they're too slow and they're too bloody cold. We've been feeding back today on really 4 visits: Rochdale, Bradford, Norwich, and I can't remember what the other one. There's 4 anyway. The thing about them all is the feedback was much the same, which has always been the same since we started out in a strange way, which is in all of those communities, the deprivation, the education, the ability to have to get food is worse than anywhere else in the country. And you go with some degree of trepidation, but actually when you get there, you realise how wonderful the people are. They're actually of the community. They actually are quite proud of what they do. And what we've got to do, and we talked about that this morning, we've got to unlock that. Because communities are the backbone of our society. Everything happens in the community, and that's why business in the community is really focused on the communities. There were 3 or 4 really things. All of us, to a degree, are struggling to get labour. But in every one of these visits, there were people who could work, but they weren't able to work. And they weren't able to work because of childcare. They weren't able to work because they were going to work from home. They needed a room and they needed a computer. They didn't have any of those things. They couldn't go to work because of transport. I mean, one of the things we found out, 50% of all the rural bus routes have been closed in the last 10 years. So if you can't get to work, then it's pretty difficult in terms of the mix. So I think there's a lot of work we can do about how we make it more flexible for people to work, because we need those people and they want to work. You know, one woman who's said to me, Alan, I want to work. I don't want to sit at home with my kids looking at me as if I don't work. I don't want to set that standard for them. So flexible working is there. The other thing is the schools. You know, we've got to get skills into the schools. We've got to do more mentoring in the schools. We've got to find a clever way of doing that, which is appropriate to them, which is relevant to them in their style, as opposed to perhaps the way we would do it in some sort of, you know, bureaucratic way. We've got to sort of understand how to talk to them. And then the other thing I think which came through very strongly is the partnerships. That this only really works if you can get everybody in the community. So you need the council, you need the government, you need our people, they need to be together to get it to work. And I think, you know, Blackpool was a very good example we saw this morning of where that's worked. I think we need to have more examples of where that's the case. And part of the thing with Blackpool is that we went back. You know, I was saying sometimes you go on one trip and then that's it. I think this thing for us to constantly go back, to not lose the thread, to go and revisit it, to make sure things have happened, I think are pretty fundamental to where we are, and to get volunteering, particularly in those communities, something that really, really counts. So that's really the feedback. I think, you know, we believe there's lots of, well, we know there's lots of things we affect, small things, and that makes a difference. I think we now start to need to think a little bit about some of the bigger things. You know, in Rochdale, I've got the Northern Gateway. It's a field. It's not. It's a field and a concept, and that would transform that society. But it will take 10 years to do. But if you don't start, you're never going to get there. So there's some of the bigger programs that we need to work on. I think the other thing for all of us, and I think it applies really true, is that I have this thing, a leader is a dealer in hope. And part of what we have to do is create that hope in those communities, but then not just create that hope, but turn that hope into reality. So I still enjoy it as much as I've ever done, 25 years later. Rochdale is the home of the co-op, so that was also something quite important to me. But it's been a great honour, Your Majesty, boss, big boss. I'll hand over to Sarah now.
Your Majesty, friends, I'm a newbie to Seeing is Believing, and I undertook my first visit to Coventry in May this year, and I have to say it was truly, truly impactful. I was humbled, I was shocked, positively shocked, and thoroughly inspired, and I really saw firsthand the power of bringing business and community together and learning about the critical issues that face local residents and workers, people who want to work, and really exploring the opportunity for businesses to offer meaningful support. In Coventry, we met 3 wonderful community organisations, the first being Foals Hill Community Centre, which includes a social supermarket, led by the inimitable and dynamic Helen Needham. Where is Helen? Helen, where are you? Where are you? Stand up, Helen. No, really stand up, Helen. Helen, thank you. Helen is an amazing individual and has an incredible team. Her centre offers deeply, amongst many things, amongst many services, that make Foals Hill Community Centre the beating heart of that community. It offers deeply discounted food to people struggling with food poverty. And they currently service over 300 members per week. And we were invited to meet the volunteers and the people that use, the members that use the facility. And we heard firsthand how members valued the ability to select and choose their own food rather than receiving food parcels. And the team works hard, really hard, to give people a dignified experience. And their work doesn't just stop there. Beyond the social supermarket, it offers a whole variety of services to really help people on their pathway to resilience. And many members, they don't have broadband, they don't have access to technology. So applying for a job, applying for benefits, there's an added hurdle there, and sometimes they don't speak English. English isn't their first language. So, team members often help individuals with housing benefits and healthcare applications. Another community leader who inspired my colleagues and I is Rashid Bayat. Rashid, please stand up. Let everybody see you because you are an amazing individual. You are the founder. He's also got an amazing music collection. The founder and CEO of the charity Positive Youth Foundation, or lovingly known as PYF for short. PYF aims to raise the aspirations and life chances of young people, including those with hugely difficult backgrounds and multiple life barriers. It offers a range of education, employment and lifestyle programs, and in 2021 and 2022 alone, they've helped over 1,500 young people. Now, the young people that we met there, were dynamic, they were progressive, they were energetic, and they were inspiring. And Rashid said something on that visit that has stayed with me and has really put the fire in my belly. It's a rounded belly, but there's a lot of fire in it. He said that young people are not hard to reach. They are just so easy to ignore. And that's, that really is profound, right? When I'm thinking about businesses reaching young people. And I wanted to say that really resonated with me. And I promise to propagate that to absolutely everybody, every leader in my ecosystem, in my midst, because it was, we hear you loud and clear. Now, I've pledged to partner with Foles Hill Community Centre and the Positive Youth Foundation to provide ongoing support. I wanted to make sure that we had focus. And so I've since taken my team, some senior leadership and broader leadership team members to meet both charities and both organisations. And for us, really at the heart of how we want to help, we want to use our people, we want to use our technology, and we want to use our funds to provide long-term and meaningful ways to support these organisations to really scale their incredible work. We don't want to do an on-off or a one-off engagement. We want to be in this for the long term and develop organically how we can help. So, my team, one of my squads, is working with the Foles Hill Community Centre to provide expert advice, technology support and volunteering time. We want to help to automate the manual, time-consuming processes that take Helen and her team away from the stuff that she does best. So things like stock management and distribution of food, helping the broader staff to save time, to focus on what they need to, and supporting the team to scale their activities and efforts. Salesforce has also provided matched funding alongside other businesses, and the centre has used that funding to build necessary extensions and improve the kitchen facilities, which again is the heart of that centre. I have another squad working with the Positive Youth Foundation, providing guidance and support for things like digital skills programme, mentoring and volunteering, and really taking advantage of our free online learning platform, Trailhead, and we want to help prepare young people for work. We're also mindful of the burden, the mental burden that is on many of the staff members at PYF, so that, in order for them to be able to do their jobs. And actually we're thinking about how we can help with that. And we're going to co-develop that with Rashid tomorrow, actually. So I'm delighted to share these actions taken by, my business peers and my business. But there were other actions from so many brilliant leaders on that visit. Many have joined or renewed commitment to the Coventry Leaders Network to act on the priority issues. Steve Hughes, the CEO of Coventry Building Society, he continues to chair the Coventry Network, and the Building Society has provided substantial funding for various initiatives across the city. The network has developed a cost of living manifesto which connects business support activity to communities, and Capita, led by the brilliant John Lewis, is now chairing the Foles Hill Leadership Group focused on addressing specific needs in the Foles Hill ward, and John Allen has since returned to PYF with his senior team to look at removing employment barriers and provide pathways to jobs. So many examples there, but many more in the Seeing is Believing report, so please do read that. Your Majesty, the Seeing is Believing programme drives real action and real impact in the communities that need it most. And I think with the cost of living crisis or rising cost of living, it's really important that businesses do lean in as much as possible to help and provide support where they can. You know, I'm so proud Gavin announced the Salesforce pledge to fund the Seeing is Believing visits for the next 3 years. And together with BITC, we're coming for you. You know, 250 leaders, please join us, join our community. Come with us on these visits and learn how you can make a real difference. I promise you, you won't regret it. Thank you. Now, Amanda.
I'm getting very conscious of your precious time, sir. Thank you for being here, Your Majesty, surrounded by your friends, your fellows, and your fans. Those of us who know just how much you have driven this agenda. And for those of you who dare not to know, it is an astounding network bound by a desire to make work fair and just, and a goal to respond to the fact we have finite resources. A network created by some brilliant leaders 40 years ago, whom alongside His Majesty have invented and shaped the best of the world of work we see today. Almost 20% of the UK's workforce are employed by a BITC member company, 1,000 companies having now signed the Race at Work Charter. Business in the community companies are twice as likely to have a plan to tackle net zero. On every front, our members are being faster, braver and bolder in their ambitions for a fair and sustainable world. But Your Majesty, this is your vision, which you have so determinedly driven. So I'm so pleased that you were able to spend time with our fellows. It did feel like a slight getting the band back together moment. I don't think I'm overstretching things to say that BITC changed the fellows' lives. BITC changes everyone's lives. And as a result, that is an impact on thousands and indeed millions of people. So as I hand over the stewardship of this very precious organisation, thank you for being a remarkable boss. Thank you for continuing to change lives and the incredible support you've given BITC. Know we will stay focused on our purpose, maintain your values, and keep driving impact across the UK. So we have one last request of your time with us today, because no anniversary is complete without a cake. So in time-honoured fashion, no bubbles, but a cake is on its way. And if I may ask you to cut the first slice. If you think I've done a good job, then please don't cut me. That's a bad joke. But I think the other thing I might dare to ask, because obviously when you cut a cake, you might make a wish. So if you have a thought about what that wish could be for us, for BITC. There we go. So, sir.
Happiest 40th birthday, everybody.
Dig in, I'd say.
I'm very proud of you all. Please remember that. Keep it going, for God's sake. Well done. Now, see if I can make this.
Fantastic. Well, that's a proper piece.
There we are.
Thank you, sir.
Excitement.
Yes. And do you have a reflection from 40 years? Is that putting you on the spot slightly? I think we're leading you off that way momentarily.
Well, I think we're only as good as the marvellous people who help. That's the point.
So true.
So none of this would have been possible without remarkable characters, not only in the business and the community, staff and headquarters, but obviously all these marvellous business people who've got involved after being dragged initially, sometimes unwillingly, to see different parts of the country. But the wonderful thing is it's being kept going by all of you.
Certainly
and I
is.
hope it will continue, because there's lots and lots of things that need doing.
So true.
Thank you.
Endlessly.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So we say farewell. Thank you, sir. I'm going to lead you off this way. I'm going to lead you off this way.
Thank you, everybody. As His Majesty leaves the hall, perhaps a final round of applause to acknowledge his extraordinary work. Now then, everybody, please stay standing. Stay standing momentarily. Don't worry, no games, no songs. But we're going to keep this conversation going. But before we do, I thought we'd just take literally a minute just to turn to our neighbour, to exchange a greeting and exchange a word of welcome, something of camaraderie before our next chapter. Let's do that briefly. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Please have a seat. Arms and legs stretched. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Responsible Business Live here at Westminster Hall. We're sort of in the basking in that afterglow of a visit by His Majesty and some very thoughtful reflections. So can I just say thank you again to Zara and Alan for those fab reflections. Let's hear it for Zara and Alan. Thank you. And our lineup continues now. We're going to have a relatively snappy conversation about why we're all here, what is happening in our communities, and what we can do more of. Our panel leads relatively little introduction, but let me just paint a bit more background for you about the people sitting up here on stage. Baroness Ruby McGregor-Smith, great to see you, Ruby. Ruby chaired the race campaign for BITC and was the brain behind the mentoring circles for diverse women, which became an established BITC program. Of course, Ruby authored the 2017 McGregor-Smith review or report on race in the UK labour market, which found that action by employers on race could boost the UK economy by £24 billion annually. Very good to see you, Ruby. Thank you for joining us. Next to Ruby is Lord Charles Allen, the second chair, actually, of the race campaign, I note, a prolific leader of the Seeing is Believing visits. Now then, the Granada Community Challenge, when Charles was running Granada TV, straight off the back of Seeing is Believing, ended up investing £6.5 million in support into 5 deprived housing estates in the northwest. So a real sort of connection point there. Thank you for being with us, Charles. Next to you, Stuart, Lord Rose of Monudon, needs, again, little introduction, a former chair of business in the community. Did you know that Marks and Spencer, to this day, which Stuart also used to chair, is the only organisation to win Company of the Year 3 times. Quite an extraordinary achievement. Stuart's legacy as chair was the Work Inspiration campaign, which enabled 100,000 young people to find fulfilling work experience opportunities. Thank you for being with us, sir. Lucy Parish, lovely to welcome you, Lucy. Great to see you. Lucy leads The Feed, fantastic organisation based out of Norwich, a series of community cafes, and recently you opened a social supermarket this summer, and we'll hear a little bit more about how that's gone. It's one of the projects visited on the Seeing is Believing visit to Norwich, which we've heard about already. Thank you for being with us. By no means least, also mentioned earlier on, Rashid joins us, Rashid Bayat, MBE. Thank you for being with us. We've heard about your brilliant organisation, Positive Youth Foundation. It's the project that so inspired and moved Zara. It's based in Coventry and aims to raise the aspirations and life chances of young people. Already this year, you have, thank you, supported 1,500 young people. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome our panel. Now, we're going to go very pithy on this. Ruby, help us get a sense of the scale of the challenges that we're facing.
In 1 minute. So I think when I look back at all the work I certainly did, and if I focus particularly on race in the workplace, since I first got involved with the Race for Opportunity campaign, I think there's still a huge amount more we're going to need to do. We still, thank you to everyone here who signed up to the Race at Work Charter with BITC, because that I think is making an incredible difference. I think having data, having ethnicity pay gap reporting, letting organisations know where they really are is going to really help them. But in terms of the scale of the issue, it's going to be big. You know, we're going into tougher times for everybody. It's not going to be top of every agenda. I just want to try and keep that agenda up there.
Yeah, so the need couldn't be clearer, Charles. If you had to put it into a nutshell, what can business do to support their community? That's the question we all face.
I think the first thing is get into the community, because actually we go to our offices, we drive up, we go into our offices and we don't see what's around us. So actually go out and look at what's actually around your offices, around your factories, around your buildings. What I think the things we can do is maybe sometimes help create a community. Where the biggest challenge came when I've been doing this for many years was when there was no community. There was no community leader. There was no group that actually felt like a community. So maybe help facilitate that. And then the second thing we heard Alan talking about earlier was partnership. You have the facilities, the capabilities to create partnerships, whether that's public-private partnerships or whether it's other groups of people coming together. You can be the catalyst and make a difference. And I think just finally, you know, just if you haven't been on Seeing is Believing, and I say I've been involved for now 35 years, which is a long time, and did many Seeing is Believing, it really is truly inspirational. You will find out a lot about yourself, and you'll find out a lot about where you can really practically help. Yeah. And finally, being competitive, I used to get my Seeing is Believing group together the night before, buy them a really good dinner, and I said, if the Prince doesn't pick our group as the winning group, you're in trouble. So you can use a bit of management by embarrassment.
Good. Management by... Good technique, very good. Stuart, easy to be shocked by the scale of the challenges. Where do you see opportunity?
Well, listen, you can always be frightened by the things that are going on in the world today, and there aren't many benefits to getting older, but I'm one of the older people in this room. I worked the last time we had serious inflation in the 70s, and for those of you who haven't experienced it before, I'm afraid it's going to be pretty unpleasant for a little while yet to come, but we will get through it if we pull together, and you know, the most important thing is to understand that business and the communities and people are indivisible. We have to all lean in and work together. Governments themselves can't sort out problems. Actually, business has got a better opportunity, in my view, of sorting out a problem than often governments do, particularly in the state of the government we've had in the last 18 months or 24 months. That wasn't a political quote, by the way. You come to your own conclusions. But listen, I'm chairman of Asda, amongst other things. I also chair a petrol business and a car business, so they're all okay, but they're all tough. There's no fun out there, and we've got, particularly in the supermarket business, to lean in to help our customers through this very difficult time. Yeah. Everybody's doing it, whether it's Tesco's, whether it's Sainsbury's, whether it's Asda, whether it's Marks & Spencer, whether others. But actually, if you do it, and we talk to each other, and we talk with communities, and we talk with local authorities, and we talk with government, we can make a difference. And I think that's, there are palpably good things going on.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Stuart. Lucy, thank you for being with us today. The Feed is an enterprise. It's doing formidable work, but help us understand what it's like on the ground right now.
Yeah, we are a social enterprise. We work with a mission to prevent poverty, hunger and homelessness in Norwich, and we do that in various different ways. One of the ways is we run employment support projects for people that have been out of work for a long time and are facing barriers back into the job market. And we also, as you mentioned, more recently opened a brand new project of a social supermarket. As a social enterprise, our kind of trading activity is a chain of cafes and a catering enterprise that we run. That's how we sort of generate our income to run our community profit projects. The social supermarket is probably the most relevant thing to talk about. When we planned our project, we did good research. We expected to get around 300 members within the first 12 months. And we're 6 months in, we've got 1,700 members. We're providing affordable food and groceries, free hygiene products and free fruit and vegetables to around 4,000 of Norwich residents. Norwich is quite small. That's a lot of people. The area that we are in, around 25% of the people, 25% of adults can't read or write. We have huge problems in that particular area, and the type of things that we're seeing every day is benefits being sanctioned, the stuff that statutory services are meant to deliver, what you will often see is small organisations like ours picking up the pieces as a sticking plaster.
And Lucy, the single biggest challenge you face right now as you go back to Norwich?
Providing enough food for people through supply chains. Yes. It's a different project now to how we designed it.
Yeah, it really
there's not a lot of free food available anymore, as there was in COVID. So keeping enough food for 1,700 members is hard.
Yeah, right. More of that in a minute. Rashid, tell us a little bit more about what you're doing on the ground in Coventry.
Sure, thank you, Ollie. I think to give context, the young people that we work with, we would say, find themselves in challenging circumstances, and Zara alluded to some of those characteristics earlier. In other forums, these young people would be called young offenders, looked after children, disenfranchised, disengaged, and the list goes on and on of the labels that we give to these young people from such a young age. I think to understand where we're at now, we should take a little trip back into time. So let's just go back 5 years. And it's not just a Coventry thing, because Coventry shares characteristics like many other areas across the UK. Far too many young people are outside of the education system. Far too many young people are involved in crime and therefore serving custodial sentences. Too many people are just disengaged from mainstream society. And that's 5 years ago. And then came COVID. Somebody had to mention it. Yeah. And with that came huge isolation for young people. And a lot of that went unreported. With that isolation came a lot of undiagnosed mental health support needs, and lots of young people then expressed challenges around their mental health. But it's only those that were, I'd say, lucky enough to have a diagnosis that are currently receiving any kind of support. So there are tens of thousands of young people across the UK that are just right now still trying to recover from COVID. Yeah. And then comes the cost of living crisis. So in all of these things that I'm identifying, I believe that young people have suffered the most because they are least in control of what's happening in their lives. Yeah. With the cost of living crisis, young people are, well, they don't usually control the family's finances.
Yes.
So they're not really sure what's going on and they are suffering. Martin Reeves, who's in the crowd today, has been a phenomenal mentor for me for the last 14 years, and congratulations on your recent news, Martin. But Martin always says to me, don't play BS bingo when it comes to things like this. Get to brass tacks and speak how it is. Kids are suffering out there. We're seeing young people that are hungry, going to bed hungry and going to school hungry. If you're going to school hungry, then your education is going to suffer. Young people aren't being able to wash their uniforms, so they're going to school and they feel ashamed of how dirty they feel.
Yes.
This is not right in this day and age, so I'll speak about it a bit more later because I know we need to move on. But where we are at now, if we're speaking in reality, is on the streets, out in the communities, things are tough.
Yeah. Somebody comes up to you after this event and says, we can help you with that. What's the specific challenge you would mention to this hall?
There are a number of challenges. I think we have seen time after time phenomenal goodwill. And I think we've got a couple of fantastic examples with our work that we're doing with Zara, with Salesforce, with Coventry Building Society. I don't know if Anna beat the train this morning to get here. With Tesco, our emerging work, and City of Guilds as well, all through the Seeing is Believing event, who are pledging meaningful and genuine support. But it's support that they're accountable for. We talked a little bit earlier about the days of painting fences are gone. I think we're really in that territory where charities like ours, we're serious businesses. We're run by leaders, not myself, of course, but we're run by exceptionally talented leaders who behave like a corporate would.
Yes,
profit margins to get out.
And this is Alan's point. Do what you say you're going to do. Now, why don't I get you all to reflect on your seeing is believing experiences, very different perspectives. Stuart, speaking personally, what would you like to see businesses doing more of if you're channeling that seeing is believing experience firsthand?
Alan was very articulate in what he said earlier on. At the end of the day, first of all, unless you actually go and walk the walk, you can't do the talk the talk. You've got to go and actually see what finds out. You will amaze yourselves if you haven't been on a seeing is believing tour, what you will discover, what people will tell you. And it does stimulate you to think about how you can make a difference. And, you know, we have a moral obligation in business to make the world a better place. We have a moral obligation at the moment to help people through the crisis that this country is facing at the moment. And just go out there and do something. But at the end of the day, look yourself in the mirror if you're participating, or indeed look yourself in the mirror if you're not participating. If you're not, ask yourself why. And if you are, ask yourself what are you going to do as a result of what you have seen and what you've heard. It's about action.
So on that action, Ruby, the equation sounds like a no-brainer. What do we need to be doing differently? What do we need more of?
I mean, well, certainly I found when I led a Seeing is Believing visit, my focus became around apprenticeships. I think what I found the most important thing to do is to take something you really can focus on and deliver something on individually. I now chair the Institute for Apprenticeships for the government. All of that has come from what I saw on my first visit and then from leading a visit. But action's about, for me, doing something very individual, whether it's in partnership, whatever you choose to do, you've got to do something coming out of those visits that really matters.
So to an extent, you're drawing a line there between that visit and that institute. The gap really was spotted.
Totally. And I think we can all do more. I mean, it's great to run businesses, have big senior roles, but that's not enough. I mean, we've all got an obligation to support the communities where we work.
Yeah. Your report, you can't read your report without hearing your passion for data. Where does that come into this as a conundrum?
Well, I think when you have data, it stops a lot of the more emotional, difficult discussions. It certainly did for me about race. There's lots of conversations at the moment about D&I, what works, what doesn't work. I think if you start with data, you can actually see what the issues are.
Yeah, 100%. Charles, you've had an extraordinary seeing is believing journey. Take us back somewhere, but crucially, tell us what you saw and what it led you to believe. Where are we going?
Probably two, maybe three examples. I took a group of people to the northwest of England, and we went to an institute for a facility for battered wives. And basically, the team were chatting, and one person was chatting to this woman, and she was telling the story that her husband had lost his job, turned to alcohol, and started beating her up. The person she was chatting to was the chief exec who closed the facility. And the impact that had on him was massive. He said, you know, for a sum of money more, I could have thought this through, because sometimes the decision we make, which might be the right business decisions, but we hadn't made the right community decisions. And I think that to me is a big issue. And the second point is a number of places we went to had lost hope. And they'd lost hope sometimes because we had promised things, we the community, we the business community, we turned up in our flashy cars, we had promised a lot, and we let them down. And therefore there was no community. So back to the point that Stuart was making, it's all about action. It's not about talking, it's about making things happen. And no matter the size of your organisation, which is my third point, I did another one to the northwest, and we had some really big companies. Marks and Spencer was there, other big companies, and there was one Indian guy who basically ran a number of factories, he said, in the area. And we said, what are you going to do? He said, what I'm going to do is give each of my factory managers £100,000 to do something in the community. And I smiled at him. I said, how many facilities do you have? He said, 37 or 38. So here was a small company putting his money where his mouth was, but more importantly, engaging his people. And that would be the third bit of advice. It's not just you, it's getting your colleagues involved, and they will get a lot out of it.
Yeah, and just very briefly, Charles, how do we square that, you're being playful with management by embarrassment, but the temptation to be audacious, to set this extraordinary goal, and yet not wanting to let somebody down because you simply couldn't deliver on it? How do we square those two? Because we want audacity.
Well, you want to be ambitious, but it needs to be realistic. I think that's the point. You don't want to let people down. So you want to have realistic targets and engage with people. In the Grammatical Community Challenge, some of the companies, it was 5 companies in 5 estates, some of the companies that were most likely to succeed actually didn't, because they went and imposed their will in the community, and the community didn't want that. They wanted us to bring our skills, our knowledge, skill, and experience, and work with them and help them. Don't look down on them, and don't, basically force it on them. They know what they want, so we work with them in terms of their agenda, not your agenda.
So listening to this, Lucy and Rashid, I mean, it's very clear that these visits are very powerful. They lead to action, certainly for the businesses, but I want your perspective on how it can be useful, helpful, and be as blunt as you like, because we want them to get better and better. Lucy, please.
The visit for us was really impactful, and it was one of those, our sort of place connector. I think Tracy is a little pocket rocket, and she rocked up into our lives and sort of whisked us all around and put us in contact with some really influential people who make decisions in business. We are an enterprise. We don't have a lot of time. We are small businesses, small enterprises, are short on people, short on money, short on resources. We don't have a dedicated person that can go out into the business community and build those kind of connections. But for us, they're incredibly important. We're a trading business. We would prefer to earn our money by trading rather than, funding bid after funding bid. We want what we're looking for is sustainability, both for us and for the people, the outcomes for the people that we support. So having those kind of links in one place,
it does make a difference.
Really was very beneficial for us.
Yeah, and just help us, Rashid, connect those dots, because Zara's been back to PYF. What does that mean in practice? Why is it so bloody helpful?
I think it's very important for the point I made earlier around accountability, because coming from a youth work background, one of our key principles is when you tell a young person you're going to do something, you do it. And that's where I think Salesforce and the Seeing is Believing event was so important, that there was a genuine follow-up. I think just to touch on the points that Lucy raised about the Salesforce visit, and going back to your early question about the impact was felt the very second the Salesforce team walked through the door. They walked through the door with the enthusiasm of young people when youth club opens. Lots of noise, lots of kind of high fives and hugs and cheering. It was just, they walked in and they represented in that way. And that was the turning point where young people that were in the building instantly took to it, and it felt that way. And the Salesforce staff team that attended, they looked like my staff team and the young people. It was a very diverse group, mixed ages, mixed ethnicities. Everything was just there. And it was that level of, I think, buy-in. And I think there'll be a further question about that later, because I think you're nudging me to...
Yeah, well, no, only because you've made me want to ask, amongst friends, is there a don't do this tip you would offer to our business guests in the room, Lucy and Rashid? Just don't do this, because it either, wastes our time.
Sure.
We've heard the do what you say you're going to do, but what else?
My don't do this was, please don't feel any pity for our community groups, our young people, our beneficiaries, because that's not what they trade on. And if you do get involved with us, Cobb Building Society, Salesforce, the examples are there. Talk to them, speak to them how they do it. And that follow-up is so personalized. They didn't come in with a, right, here's what we're good at and we're going to do that. Because for us, we were clear what we didn't want. And that was for us to utilize our very limited resource in managing a corporate organization's time. Because if that was the case, we could have just done a photo opportunity and we all go off on our own way. Hashtag just giving, we're all happy. But this was much more than that. This is about getting stuck in. So the don't do is, if you're not going to commit to it, if you're not going to see through what you've promised to do, but more importantly, if you're not prepared to become vulnerable the second you walk in. Because the Salesforce guys, when they came and they presented to the young people, they made themselves so vulnerable. So you've got to go all in, or please just, with respect.
Go home.
I didn't say that, by the way. Lucy said go home.
yeah, exactly. Go vulnerable or go home. I like it. Through the Lens podcast, BITC's podcast, the guests ask each other questions. So I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm going to say to Stuart, Charles, and Ruby, what questions have you got for Lucy and Rashid? And I'll turn the tables in a minute. But listening to their work, listening to their stories, questions pop to mind, and we'd be open, we'll be blunt.
So you talked about what businesses shouldn't do. What is the most successful thing you've seen them do when they've got involved? The best.
And just in the interest of time, we're going to go really short on the answers to get more questions. Forgive me, we'd like to talk way more about this.
I've been really impressed, actually, with the feedback session this morning at the actions that were taken away from the meetings, actually being listened to. You know, there is a sense as a small community group of, you know, lots of businesses being, okay, what can we do to help the community, but actually not having those consultations with people who are working with the community, or even better, the community themselves. So actually, it was lovely this morning to sit around the table and listen to people that came to see us to say, this is how we've progressed it. You know, we know that you don't want a phone call saying we've got 17 people that want to come and volunteer tomorrow. What can you do? No, we don't want that. What we want is really sustainable assistance in areas that we are not resourced in. So people that are experts at things to regularly give their time. You know, if I could, you know, somebody in finance just to come and see me once a month and say, yeah, your accounts look all right.
That sustained commitment.
Sustained commitment.
Let's get one more question this way going on. Charles?
I think picking up on your sustainability points thing, how do you engage with our people in the organisation, not just chairman, chief exec, senior exec? How do you do that? Because your resources are limited. So is there anything that companies could do to help you? How do you do that to get that buy-in from their organisation, not just the chief exec signing something off? Because that doesn't really work, basically, because they disappear and you need people on the ground. What do you do to achieve that?
Jumping in, I would say that's possibly businesses' incentive to do that. You know, yes, it's the visits are with a senior person from an organisation, but our hope would be that person would go away feeling so inspired that would then be fed down. You know, it's about that stewardship of an organisation. This is how I'm going to lead, and this is how I expect my staff to, the type of values that I expect them to follow and, you know, and live by as well.
Now, Rashid, Stuart Rose is hoping you've got an absolute stinker of a question for him. So if you wouldn't...
You're asking me, aren't
you? Rashid, no, I want to know what Rashid's got for you, Stuart. Don't be afraid to put him on the spot.
Put me on the spot now.
Yeah.
So, a question I guess I'd pose then is, as the voluntary sector, social enterprise, charities, what do you need from us? What do you need us to present to yourselves as businesses to compel? Because I think we can easily invite you down to our centres or where we're operating and you can see it for yourself, but we're living in a data-driven world. And I know, and I advocate quite a bit, that the voluntary sector itself needs to mature a lot more. But what do we need to be giving to yourselves?
I think I'd probably say, listen, leadership is a privilege, and it brings with it all sorts of obligations. And I think, you know, the trouble with us leaders is, if you're either a chief executive or you're a board member or you're leading in a part of an organization, is that we get tied up in our day-to-day stuff. We get tied up in a little bit of our, you know, what is my Monday priority, my Tuesday priority, and we lose sight sometimes of the bigger picture. Your job is to prick our conscience. Your job is to remind us that we have obligations. Your job is to nag us. And I used to have a boss many years ago and said to me, Stuart, you know, if you knock on the door, someone slams the door in your face, just keep knocking. Keep knocking.
Keep knocking. I love it. Right. Final thoughts. Thank you, Stuart. Final thoughts. You've hinted at some of those challenges in 20 seconds each. Something that you would ask these businesses for today, maybe personally for your organisations, but maybe more broadly for your peers. Lucy, then Rashid.
Consider your procurement practices.
Yes.
And make sure that social enterprise is a priority when you are buying things through your supply chain. Look at your supply chain, make sure we're there. We are businesses, you know, we run our businesses well, and I'm not sure how long I'm going to dine out on this for, but the Feed recently won Small Business of the Year in Norfolk, so we know our stuff, we know what we do. So you are getting a quality product when you're buying through social enterprises. We know our staff.
Think about those procurement practices and supply chain. Rashid, briefly, please.
Sounds very dramatic, but your support not only changes lives, but it can save lives. And let me briefly explain. Yeah. A young person who doesn't have any career prospects ends up in a lifestyle they don't choose. Yeah. And quite often, I think you know where I'm going with this. Over the last 3 years, we've buried 7 young people. And I ask you, as corporates, as businesses, if your recruitment, your training, the way you attract young people can be shifted to work with the most disadvantaged young people that just don't get a break, would those young people still be around today? And that's not a guilt trip, that's a reality check. We see too many young people who end up on living a life of crime, whatever it might be, not through choice, absolute necessity, and that's not going to get any easier.
Thank you, Rashid. Ruby, our guests today, many of them contemplating a visit, a final word, a message to them as they sit in this hall and contemplate their next actions.
Well, if you haven't done a visit, you've got to do a visit. I mean, as Amanda said earlier, when you get involved with business and community, you never leave. I mean, all these years later, I'm still here. And I think it does change you. It did completely change the way I thought about the entire ESG agenda and what businesses could do to really support communities. And once you see it, you can't go back.
Yeah, massively appreciate how clearly and openly you've shared today. Ruby, Charles, Stuart, Lucy and Rashid, thank you so much for joining us. Please. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, so good. Please. Now, as our guests leave the stage, I'm going to welcome back up momentarily into our next section, the Chief Executive of Business in the Community, Amanda Mackenzie. Amanda. We're not going to do them. No. Okay. Well, I tell you what I've got is I've got a couple of ideas now about just how to bring this extraordinary session to a close. So what I'm asking you to do is, can I just have a show of hands again, everybody, from anyone who's done a Seeing is Believing visit? Will you raise your hand, please? Fantastic. In fact, why don't we do this? We'll just literally take 2 minutes to do this. If you just all be upstanding, we'll just do this because this would be very helpful. Very, very helpful. Thank you. Raise your hand if you've done a Seeing is Believing visit. Fantastic. Now, if you now find yourself stood next to someone with their hand raised, why don't we just take a moment, because by definition you're not yet in that group, why don't we just ask them in a minute or two, just very, very briefly, any reflections they have personally. Let's do that and we'll be straight back on the main stage. Let's just do that. Okay. Okay, everybody, thank you very much. Please have a seat. Hopefully, seeds have been sown, connections have been made. Thank you. And we have time over lunch for more of these conversations. Now, I'm joined on stage by Amanda. Amanda, this was quite a conversation. Your reflection.
Pardon?
I think somebody said powerful.
Oh, it was, incredibly, yeah. So much of the insight was incredible. I selfishly also wanted to hear from, and we're going to run out of time sadly, a lot of the fellows, because when they did their story of, BITC changed my life by, they are unbelievably moving. But I think what I would take from that conversation was commit properly, do it properly or don't bother, as you say, go home, be tenacious, get some grit in there, and as Stuart said, keep knocking the doors down in any direction, actually, to make the changes that we need to see.
No, 100%. And phenomenal to be joined by His Majesty this afternoon. Did you manage to get a wish from him in the end?
Well, we sort of did, didn't we? But I think he was really quite moved by how much over the years, how much work has gone on in the name of business in the community and how much the need is still here, which is pretty self-evident. So I think he was clearly very, very thrilled.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was absolutely loud and clear. Amanda, thank you for your service. We're going to mention that again momentarily, but to help close our gathering today, why don't we welcome back on stage Gavin Patterson. Gavin.
I'm going to stand there.
Ollie, where are you going?
Where am I going?
I was just going to thank you. It's been a truly inspiring event.
I'll stay here then. Carry on.
It's been a truly inspiring event. Now, before we close, there are some important welcomes and indeed farewells that I'd like to draw attention to. First of all, may I invite John Neal and Steve Holliday to join me up on stage for a second.
Yeah.
Steve has been Vice Chair of BITC for 8 years and a trustee for 14. A previous HRH National Ambassador, he led National Grid to be BITC's Company of the Year. He co-led the Work Inspiration Campaign and was the first chair of the New Talent and Skills Leadership Team. He's a true friend to BITC and will remain part of the family. John has been our longest-serving trustee and a real critical friend. He's always at the forefront of new ideas and transformational change. He's chaired countless awards, judging panels, and sponsored our awards. He's chaired the Audit Committee for 20 years and worn the safeguarding hat as well. John has responsible business in his DNA, and he too will remain part of the BITC family. So we have a time-honored tradition. Amanda, would you like to join me? Which is glassing out, I'm told.
Yes, such an extraordinary phrase. It feels like something in a Glasgow pub, doesn't it? Glassing out. But anyway, Steve, here is your glassing out moment. Thank you for everything. And John, incredible, thank you. You are amazing. Thank you.
Thank you both. Now for our hello. I'm delighted to invite on stage Mary McLeod, BITC's new CEO. Mary, please come up. Mary officially joins us from January the 1st, but we wanted to use this important day to welcome you on board. We're excited about our journey forward together. I think we all know that as well as the end to a marvellous and important anniversary year today, this also marks the close of Amanda's stint as BITC's CEO. And I just wanted to pay tribute to her publicly, which I know she'll really hate. Amanda, You always said that BITC should be an irresistible organisation with remarkable people. I think our 500 guests in the room today would certainly agree with that. You've done so much for this organisation. You introduced a new health check for businesses, the Responsible Business Tracker, putting purpose and values at the heart of a healthy business. And then when the pandemic hit, you led BITC in setting up the National Business Response Network to connect business support to the communities that needed it most. This helped 2 million people with over 6,000 connections and was recognised by the government as the best response from the charity sector to the COVID-19 pandemic. You accelerated the Race to Work agenda by setting up the Race to Work Charter, with close to 1,000 signatories today. You kick-started the Seeing is Believing programme in the 40th anniversary year, and we all know how important that programme is, and Salesforce in particular is firmly behind you with Seeing is Believing. You've worked tirelessly to raise the profile of the organisation and put members at the heart of what we do. Amanda, the board and your executive team wanted to get you something by way of a thank you. We wanted to get you something that would serve as a lasting memory for all you've achieved. Knowing your love of the countryside and your home in Dorset, we decided the most appropriate gift would be something that would reflect that. And it would reflect your time at BITC, all you've done, and would demonstrate, I think, the gratitude that we have to you. So we've decided to buy you a bench, which will be making its way to your home in Dorset, along with some beautiful garden cushions, and it's all been arranged by your husband, John. So we hope you'll like it. Thank you for your partnership.
Goodness, well, I think everything that's been said earlier is, and those words were phenomenal, and thank you so much. But it's, it is the people, it is our members. Just never stop doing what is so important, and that's the best legacy anyone can have. And I think we've seen from His Majesty today. The organisation today is a representation of that passion, the fellows that have been with us for 40 years, and not all of them 40 years, obviously, but some of them through the years. So please just keep doing it. That's the most important thing. Mary will be amazing, and just huge thanks to all of you, because you make it. You are business in the community, we are business in the community. And Ollie, you've been incredible, thank you today. And also to everyone, Team BITC have helped make the day so special, because as you can imagine, there's a lot of moving parts today, and these things don't happen by accident. So huge thanks to Team BITC, but above all, thanks to everyone in the room for what you're going to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you. Well, another huge thanks to Amanda and to the whole team behind today. I'll just recap incredibly briefly with those 3 requests that we've made of you, because they are loud and clear. Number 1, get on that bus and sign up to a Seeing is Believing visit. It will change your life. And you can do that through our QR code, which we'll be sharing, and of course on the website itself. We want to reactivate the National Business Response Network. You've heard about its formidable work in the pandemic. You can do that by pledging your support today. So again, register with the QR code, which you'll see around the venue, but also we're going to come back to you in your inboxes and that. Tell you exactly how you can do that. And by the way, of course, your relationship manager can help you on all of those things. Every organisation here should have signed the Race Charter, so please keep working with our brilliant advisors at Business in the Community on that to take action on those commitments. Again, more on the site. So the Race Charter, the reactivation of the National Business Response Network, and new calls for sign-ups for seeing is believing. Thank you in advance of that. Now, at this point, I'm just going to say thank you for the many people who have joined us around the UK and indeed further beyond for that. And that concludes this particular session. Thank you for tuning in. For everybody here in the room, just a final bit of traffic control. But before I do, I'm just going to tell you where we can go after this. But can we just have a huge round of applause for everyone who's contributed to today? Thank you.